Bernice Walker had packed her hospital bag the night before, slippers, Bible, and her favorite pink scarf. She was scheduled for a routine gallbladder surgery. In and out, the doctor had said. Nothing to worry about. Her daughter Patrice insisted on driving her. "Mama, you don't trust that bus when you've got anesthesia in your future," she joked. Bernice laughed. "Child, I've been on that bus so long it knows my blood type." They arrived at Mercy Hills Medical Center just after sunrise. The front lobby was bright, the floor polished so smooth it reflected the fluorescent lights like water. At the check-in desk, a young woman in scrubs typed Bernice's name into the computer. "First name Bernice, last name Walker?" "Yes, baby, Walkr," Bernice said slowly, as if she were teaching first grade again. The clerk frowned. We've got two Bernice Walkers." Patrice leaned in. "Two?" "Yes, one born in 1951, one in 1954. "That's my mama, 51, Patrice said. The clerk nodded and clicked something on the screen. "Oh, okay. Looks like the system merged your record last week, probably a duplicate cleanup." Bernice blinked. "Merged? With who?" "Another patient with your name. Happens all the time." Patrice frowned. "So, which one are you looking at right now?" The clerk hesitated. "Well, it should be yours, I think. The ID number matches your insurance." Patrice exhaled. "You think?" The woman smiled nervously. "Don't worry, ma'am. The system keeps everything organized." An hour later, Bernice sat in pre-op, wearing the blue gown and holding her glasses in one hand. A nurse came by to scan the barcode on her wristband. Name and date of birth? Bernice Walker, April 3rd, 1951. The nurse froze. "That's strange. The bracelet says April 8th, 1954. Patrice's head snapped up. "That's not my mother's birthday." "Oh, probably just a printing error," the nurse said, trying to sound casual. "I'll fix it in the system." But when she scanned again, the computer beeped red. "See," Patrice said, "something's wrong." The nurse frowned at her tablet. "It says here Mrs. Walker has no allergies." Patrice's eyes widened. "She's allergic to penicillin. It's in her chart." The nurse checked again. "Not in this one, ma'am." Patrice stood. "Then that's not her chart." Moments later, a resident came in carrying a clipboard. "Okay, Mrs. Walker, just confirming, you've had your gallbladder removed before?" Bernice blinked. "No, that's what I'm here for." The young doctor looked confused. "It says here you had the procedure in 2017. Patrice snapped. "That's the other Bernice Walker." The resident glanced at the nurse. "We might have a merged file." Patrice's voice rose. "You might? My mother's about to be rolled into surgery with someone else's allergies and history?" The nurse whispered, "It's probably just a system glitch." Patrice cut her off. "A glitch doesn't almost give my mama the wrong drug." They called for the floor supervisor. He arrived with a tablet and furrowed brow. "Yes, I see the problem. The hospital's new patient matching software combined your mother's record with another patient's profile last week. Similar name, same zip code, and both with Medicare." Patrice crossed her arms. "So a computer decided they were the same person?" He nodded uneasily. "It happens sometimes during data consolidation." Bernice looked at her daughter. "Honey, I knew I was popular, but I didn't know I had a twin." Patrice managed a small laugh, then turned back to the supervisor. "You need to unmerge her file now." He sighed. "That requires IT authorization. It could take a few hours." "Well, you better call whoever you need to," Patrice said, "because she's not going under anesthesia until that bracelet matches her birthday." By then, Bernice's surgeon had arrived, expecting to start the procedure. Patrice stood her ground. "Doctor, you wouldn't operate on the wrong patient, would you?" The surgeon frowned. "Of course not." "Then you won't operate until her name is fixed." The room went quiet. The doctor nodded slowly. You're right. Hours later, the IT technician arrived, typing fast on his laptop. After a few minutes, he looked up. Okay, I separated the records, but you'll need a new ID band and new consent form. Patrice exhaled in relief. And make sure that allergy note is on top. Bernice chuckled weakly. Lord have mercy, I almost went in as somebody else. Patrice took her mother's hand. Not on my watch. Bernice Walker came for a surgery. She ended up proving that identity isn't just paperwork, it's protection. When the system decided who she was, it forgot to ask the only person who knew for sure. That night, as she finally drifted to sleep, Bernice whispered to her daughter, Imagine being erased by your own name. Patrice squeezed her hand. That's why we're here, Mama, to make sure they remember it next time. The next morning, Patrice sat in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of burnt coffee, trying to understand how a machine could confuse her mother for someone else. The IT technician from the night before stopped by their table. Mrs. Walker's files should be clean now, he said. We separated the duplicate. Patrice looked up. Can you tell me how it happened in the first place? He hesitated. Honestly, it's the software. It tries to help us. Bernice, still wearing her new wristband, gave a soft laugh. Helped me right into the wrong body. The technician smiled sheepishly. It's called a master patient index. Every time someone visits, their information gets matched to existing records. The system looks at names, birth dates, insurance IDs, addresses, even phone numbers. Patrice nodded slowly. So it thought my mother and that other lady were the same because they live near each other? Pretty much, he said. The program assumes a high match score when several fields line up. Same name, zip code, insurance type. It's meant to prevent duplicates. But it caused one, Patrice said. He sighed. That's the risk. Automation isn't perfect, but hospitals like it because it saves time. Bernice shook her head. Time for who? He gave a weak smile. Not for the patients, I guess. Later that day, while Bernice waited for her rescheduled surgery, Patrice stopped by the nurse's station. A senior nurse named Carol pulled her aside. Honey, these mix-ups happen more than people realize, she said quietly, especially with older patients who have common names. Patrice frowned. You mean it's normal? Carol shrugged. Normal doesn't mean okay. But hospitals use this software to keep track of millions of records. It's cheaper than having a person check everything by hand. So the computer guesses? Carol nodded. And we're supposed to trust its guesses unless something looks wrong. Patrice's voice rose. Like a wrong birthday or missing allergy? Carol put a hand on her arm. You caught it in time. A lot of folks don't. When the surgeon came by to apologize, Patrice asked him the same question. Why does the system get to decide who's who? He adjusted his glasses, looking embarrassed. It's all about data consolidation. Every hospital merges old files from different systems, labs, clinics, insurance. The idea is one patient, one record. And what happens when it's two patients, one record? She asked. He sighed. Then we have to clean up the mess, but we don't see the problem until it reaches the bedside. Bernice looked at him kindly. You mean you trust a machine to keep your house in order and only notice the leak when it floods? The doctor chuckled softly. That's one way to put it. That afternoon, Patrice walked down to the information desk and asked to see her mother's merged file. The clerk raised an eyebrow. You can't access that, ma'am. It's internal. Then how do I know it's fixed? The clerk hesitated. You'll just have to trust the system. Patrice smiled thinly. That's what got us here. Back in her mother's room, she explained what she learned. It's called an index, Mama, like a phone book that doesn't know everyone's middle name. Bernice chuckled. So it just guesses and hopes for the best? Exactly, Patrice said. And when it's not sure, it picks the one that looks cheaper or newer. The other lady's insurance updated first, so it merged the files under her number. Bernice raised an eyebrow. So her insurance got smarter and mine disappeared. Patrice smiled. That's one way to say it. That night, as the monitors hummed softly, Bernice stared at her new wristband, her correct one, and whispered, "All this because I share a name with a stranger." Patrice held her hand. "It's more than a name, Mama. It's how they see you. To the computer, you're just a pattern that fits." Bernice nodded slowly. "Then it's time we remind them that patterns don't breathe. People do." Hospital ID systems were built to organize chaos, but they learned to assume instead of ask. The program that saved time for staff nearly cost a life because it believed two women with the same name were one and the same. Automation can merge records in seconds. It takes humans hours to undo the harm. Before she slept, Bernice wrote in her notebook, "The system guesses my name, but it doesn't know my story." She smiled, eyes closing. Tomorrow, they can start learning both. Next, Patrice discovers what the computer got wrong, how one name match and one missing allergy line nearly turned a simple surgery into a tragedy. The next morning, Patrice stood at her mother's bedside with a tablet in her hand. The nurse had given her temporary access to the patient portal, and Patrice couldn't stop scrolling. "There it is," she murmured. "Two sets of labs, two addresses, two birthdays. The system doesn't even know which one is real." Bernice adjusted her glasses. "Lord, no wonder they almost gave me someone else's gallbladder." Patrice frowned. "Look here. See this line? It says you're allergic to strawberries, not penicillin." Bernice laughed. "I love strawberries. It's the penicillin that tried to kill me back in '78. Patrice shook her head. The other Bernice Walker must have had her own list of allergies, and the computer just picked the version with fewer warnings. Bernice's smile faded. So it erased the one that mattered most? When the new nurse came in to check vitals, Patrice asked, "How does that even happen? Shouldn't someone double-check this before surgery?" The nurse sighed. "In theory, yes, but the system combines old and new records automatically. It flags similarities as high-confidence matches. The idea is to save time." "Confidence," Patrice repeated. "That's a dangerous word for a machine that almost gave my mama the wrong drug." The nurse nodded. "We depend on it more than we should. If no one questions the data, it becomes truth by default." Later that day, an older technician came to take Bernice's blood pressure. He smiled kindly and said, "We've been having trouble with that matching program ever since they upgraded it. The thing can't tell one Walker from another. We had a Mr. James Walker show up last week, and the system gave him a prenatal appointment." Bernice burst out laughing. "Lord, that man must have been surprised." The tech grinned. He said, "I just came for my blood work, not a baby shower." Patrice smiled but didn't relax. "So it's a known problem?" He nodded. "We file reports all the time. The software company keeps saying they'll fix it in the next update, but you can't patch trust." That evening, Patrice went down to the hospital's information office. She asked for her mother's merged record audit. The clerk frowned. "You're not authorized to view system logs." Patrice crossed her arms. "Then tell me who is, because that system nearly gave my mother the wrong anesthesia, and I'm not leaving until someone explains it." After a tense minute, the clerk disappeared into the back. A few moments later, she returned with a printed report. Patrice scanned the first page. Merge ID 14A-Walker-B. Confidence score 92%. Under matching fields, it listed last name, zip code, insurance type, and partial date of birth. "Partial?" Patrice muttered. "They ignored the year?" The clerk shrugged. "It happens when old records don't match exactly. The system fills in the blanks." "Fills in the blanks?" Patrice repeated. "With someone's life?" Back in the room, Patrice showed the report to her mother. "So it decided I was born in 1954 because it didn't like 1951, Bernice said dryly. Maybe it wanted me younger. Patrice managed a small laugh. If only it came with a smaller hospital bill. But when she flipped to the second page, her smile vanished. Mama, look. It says you had gallbladder surgery in 2017. That's the other woman's operation. Bernice's eyes widened. If I hadn't caught that bracelet mistake, they would have thought I was coming in for a follow-up. Exactly, Patrice said quietly. They could have skipped a step, given you the wrong prep, or dosed you wrong. Bernice shook her head. Ain't that something? All that fancy technology, and it can't keep two grandmamas apart. That night, Patrice sat by the window of her mother's room, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the hospital's glass walls. They built a system that doesn't see people, she whispered, just patterns that fit well enough to be convenient. Bernice, half asleep, murmured, "Well enough isn't good enough when it comes to my blood." Patrice nodded. "No, ma'am, we're going to fix this, for you and for whoever that other Bernice Walker is." The computer didn't lie. It just assumed. It saw the same name, the same zip code, the same type of insurance, and decided the rest didn't matter. But in medicine, every small difference is the line between safety and harm. Before she turned in, Bernice reached for her notebook and wrote, "They say the system was confident. So was I, that I'm not the woman it thought I was." She smiled faintly. "Confidence isn't the same as correctness," she whispered. Next, Patrice takes her fight from the hospital floor to hospital policy, confronting a bureaucracy that trusts machines more than mothers, and proving that saving time should never come before saving lives. By Monday morning, Patrice had reached her limit. Her mother's surgery was postponed again, and the hospital still hadn't issued a formal correction letter. All she wanted was a clear answer. Who gets to fix the mistake before it becomes a tragedy? At the nurse's station, she asked to speak with the charge nurse. A tall woman with a kind face introduced herself as Linda. "I'm not angry with you," Patrice said calmly, "but I need to understand the policy. Why can't anyone change a wrong chart immediately?" Linda sighed. "Because our policy says all edits have to go through the data integrity team. That's to keep people from deleting the wrong record." "But the wrong record could have deleted my mother," Patrice shot back. Linda didn't disagree. "You're right. The policy was built for safety. It just forgot speed." A few minutes later, the surgeon appeared, looking rushed. "We've got an opening this afternoon. Can your mother go in?" Patrice crossed her arms. "Not until her chart is confirmed by a human being, not a database." The doctor looked exasperated. "Miss Walker, every minute we wait increases her discomfort." Patrice met his gaze. "Every minute we rush could cost her life. So which pain matters more, waiting or burying a mistake?" The surgeon opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he nodded. "Give me an hour. I'll get the head of data services up here myself." When the director arrived, she carried a thick binder labeled Patient Record Integrity Policy. She spoke like someone who'd recited the same speech 100 times. "Our system automatically merges patient records when there's a 90% match. Staff can override it only with supervisor approval." Patrice frowned. "And how long does that take?" "Normally, up to 24 hours. 24 hours? My mother was almost given penicillin in less than 10 minutes. The woman hesitated. "I understand your frustration, but if we stop trusting the algorithm, we lose efficiency." Patrice's voice rose. "If you only trust it, you lose people." Bernice, sitting on the hospital bed, spoke quietly. "Baby, I waited 72 years for someone to call me by my right name. I can wait another day for the right chart." Everyone in the room fell silent. Later that afternoon, a young administrator knocked on the door with a tablet in hand. "Good news," he said. "The file's fixed, but to keep the surgery schedule, we'll need your mother to sign a waiver acknowledging the delay was caused by a clerical discrepancy." Patrice blinked. "You want her to sign something that blames her for the hospital's mistake?" "It's just protocol," he stammered. "It prevents complications with billing." Patrice smiled thinly. The only complication I see is an institution afraid of admitting it's wrong. That evening, the billing department called. Ms. Walker, we noticed duplicate charges on your mother's account, likely from the other patient's file. We'll need time to reconcile. Patrice asked, how much are we talking about? $3,487. Patrice's jaw dropped. So the system not only almost killed her, it tried to charge her for someone else's surgery? The representative hesitated. That's one way to put it. She hung up, furious. At 9 p.m., the floor supervisor returned to the room, apologetic. We've escalated the case, he said. Corporate's getting involved. Patrice exhaled. Good. Maybe they'll care about more than efficiency. The man nodded. Honestly, Ms. Walker, you're doing what most people don't, asking questions. Most just sign and move on. Patrice smiled sadly. That's how systems like this survive, on silence. By the time Bernice finally drifted to sleep, Patrice sat in the chair by her bed, her notebook open. She scribbled a sentence in bold letters. Policy without empathy is just paperwork with a pulse. She closed the book. Tomorrow, she whispered, we stop asking and start proving. Hospitals call it compliance. Families call it survival. The system that promises safety often hides behind its own procedures, trusting machines to fix the mistakes they created. But when rules value efficiency over accuracy, compassion becomes optional. The next morning, Patrice met with the hospital's privacy officer. This isn't just about my mother, she said. How many other names got lost in your system? The woman didn't answer, but Patrice could tell from her eyes that she already knew. Next, Patrice follows the paper trail through the hospital's own data logs and discovers the quiet truth. The next morning, Patrice walked into the hospital's administrative wing with her notebook tucked under her arm and a calm she didn't really feel. She had spent half the night reading every word of her mother's consent forms, every policy reference she could find. Now she wanted proof, the kind no one could talk away. At the front desk, she said evenly, I'd like a copy of the merge report for patient Bernice Walker, ID ending in 491. The receptionist blinked. Ma'am, those files are internal. Patrice smiled politely. I'll wait. After a tense pause, the woman disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, a man in a gray suit appeared, holding a folder. I'm the compliance officer, he said, extending a hand. I hear you're asking about data integrity. I'm asking why your system almost erased my mother, Patrice said. He gestured toward a small conference room. Let's talk privately. Inside, he laid out the paperwork. Here's what happened. When we switched to the new record system last year, we imported nearly 1 million patient files. The algorithm automatically merged any that were 90% identical. Your mother's was one of them. Patrice opened the folder and scanned the first page. The words, Merge Confidence 93% were circled in blue. Next to it, in smaller print, matching fields, last name, zip code, Medicare plan type. She looked up. That's it? No photo? No social? No birth year? He cleared his throat. Those were considered optional fields during the migration. Optional? Patrice said, voice rising. You treated her identity like a suggestion. On the next page, she found a memo titled Duplicate Reduction Initiative Phase 2. It bragged about saving the hospital over $2 million annually by consolidating duplicate records and reducing unnecessary storage. Patrice tapped the line with her pen. So you saved money by merging people? The man winced. That's not how we describe it. Then how would you describe giving my mother someone else's blood type? He didn't answer. She flipped further down and found a list labeled high-risk names for duplication. The top 10 were common surnames: Walker, Johnson, Williams, Brown, Davis. Her throat tightened. Do you even realize what these names mean in this city? You didn't build a patient system, you built a bias machine. The officer sighed. I'll admit, the data team did raise concerns, but leadership wanted efficiency. Patrice nodded slowly. Efficiency, she repeated. That's the word people use when they don't have to clean up what it breaks. That afternoon, she met Tasha, the same journalist who had written about her mother's refill case months before. When Patrice laid the documents on the cafe table, Tasha's eyes widened. They're using a name list? She asked. Yup, Patrice said. They literally have a file that ranks which surnames are more likely to duplicate. And guess whose communities they belong to? Tasha shook her head. You can't make this up. This is the same playbook, different department. She picked up her phone. Can I quote you? Patrice nodded. Quote me loud. A week later, the headline hit the paper. Hospital data error puts Black seniors at risk of misidentification. The story quoted the internal memo word for word. Patients from several neighborhoods called the newsroom saying the same thing had happened to them. Wrong allergies, missing test results, inflated bills. The hospital released a short statement. We take data accuracy seriously and are reviewing our patient matching protocols. Bernice read it on her phone and snorted. If that's serious, I'd hate to see casual. The following day, a state investigator arrived at the hospital unannounced. The staff whispered as she walked the halls. Patrice watched from the waiting area, a quiet satisfaction rising in her chest. They're finally looking, she said. Bernice smiled. You shine a light bright enough, baby, even the roaches start running. That night, Patrice sat by her mother's bed, flipping through her notes. She wrote, They built a system to save money on storage and lost track of people instead. Turns out, efficiency costs the most when it replaces attention. Bernice smiled as she watched her daughter write. You should have been a lawyer, she said. Patrice grinned. Nah, I like the sound of truth better than argument. In a system built to measure everything, the one thing they never counted was trust. The paper trail proved what the computer never would. Mistakes weren't accidents. They were policy. The next morning, Tasha called again. They're holding a press conference tomorrow, she said. They're promising reform. Patrice looked at her mother, still holding her notebook. Good, she said. Let's make sure they keep their promise this time. Next, the story spreads beyond one hospital. Other families come forward, exposing how common names and careless software quietly rewrite identities, until a movement begins to demand every patient's right to be seen, spelled, and treated as themselves. The story spread faster than Patrice expected. By the end of the week, the local news stations had picked it up, then the regional ones, and soon the story had a name of its own, the Forgotten Names. People started calling the newspaper, then calling Patrice. A woman from Georgia said her father had been billed for dialysis treatments he never received because his file was merged with another man's. A nurse from Baltimore wrote that her hospital used the same system and had hundreds of duplicates quietly being fixed every quarter. An email from Mississippi stopped Patrice cold. It read, My mama's name is also Bernice Walker. They almost gave her insulin instead of heart medicine. Thank you for telling the truth. Patrice showed it to her mother. Bernice chuckled softly. Lord, now there's two of us again, but this time we're on the same side. Soon, national reporters were calling. Headlines read, Hospitals merge records, patients pay the price. Black seniors disproportionately affected by data errors. The stories had numbers now, thousands of incidents across the country. Most were small mistakes, mismatched addresses, missing lab results. But others were serious, Wrong blood types, duplicated prescriptions, and even one death still under investigation. Bernice shook her head when she saw the broadcast. It's never just one name. Once a system forgets a person, it forgets anyone who looks like them. A few days later, the hospital called Patrice and asked if she and her mother would meet with their leadership team. The CEO, a pale man with weary eyes, opened the meeting with a nervous smile. "Mrs. Walker, Miss Walker, we want to say we're deeply sorry for what happened. It exposed a flaw we didn't fully understand." Patrice nodded. "A flaw that happens to people who look like us a lot more often than people who look like you." He cleared his throat. "We're investigating that pattern." Bernice leaned forward. "Baby, you don't need an investigation to know what you already see." The room went quiet. After the meeting, the hospital announced a public initiative called Project True Match to review every patient record. But Patrice noticed something interesting. Every press release used the same phrase, rare instances of data error. She called Tasha. "Rare?" she said. "How many stories do we need before it stops being rare and starts being routine?" Tasha replied, "That's what they say until someone counts out loud. Keep counting." Within weeks, advocacy groups joined the fight. The National Association for Retired Professionals demanded legislation requiring hospitals to run human verification checkpoints before surgeries or major treatments. Civil rights lawyers argued that algorithmic record matching was quietly reproducing racial bias, one keystroke at a time. At a community meeting downtown, Patrice spoke to a room full of families. She held up her mother's old wristband, the one with the wrong birthday. "This little strip of plastic nearly cost my mother her life," she said. "And she's not alone. Every wrong record is a voice that couldn't argue back. But we can." The room erupted in applause. Back at home, Bernice watched the segment on TV. The camera caught her daughter mid-sentence, her expression fierce. Bernice smiled. "I always said that girl had a teacher's voice." Carl, her grandson, who had come over to help with groceries, said, "She's teaching the whole country now." Bernice nodded slowly. "Good, because the lesson's simple. Spell our names right, and maybe start treating us right, too." The next morning, Patrice received another email, this time from a state senator's office. They wanted her and her mother to testify at a hearing on patient identity and data safety. Patrice looked at Bernice. "You ready to tell them what happens when a system forgets someone?" Bernice smiled. "Baby, I've been waiting 70 years to be remembered properly. Let's go make it official." When injustice repeats across hundreds of stories, it stops being an error and starts being evidence. From coast to coast, families who once felt invisible began to realize they were part of the same pattern, and that pattern had a name: neglect by design. That night, Bernice wrote in her notebook, "It wasn't just my file that was missing. It was the belief that my name mattered." She closed the book and said softly, "Now, maybe they'll start listening to the people they almost erased." Next, Patrice and Bernice take their story to Washington, where a new bill could finally force hospitals to confirm every name, every allergy, and every heartbeat with human eyes before machines decide who's who. The trip to Washington felt surreal. Bernice stared out the plane window as the clouds rolled by, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She still couldn't believe a hospital mix-up had brought her here, to testify before Congress. Patrice sat beside her, flipping through her notes. "You nervous, Mama?" Bernice smiled faintly. "Baby, I raised you through 3 recessions and a tornado. Talking to a few politicians isn't gonna scare me." Patrice laughed softly. "Just remember, keep it simple. Tell them what happened and what needs to change." Bernice nodded. "Simple's all I got." The hearing room was large, cold, and lined with cameras. A panel of senators sat behind microphones, papers stacked high in front of them. A banner overhead read, "Hearing on Patient Identity and Healthcare Technology." When Bernice's name was called, she rose slowly, steadying herself on the edge of the table. Her voice was calm but carried through the room. "My name is Bernice Walker. I'm 72 years old. I came here because a computer almost called me someone else and almost killed me because of it." She paused, letting the silence settle. "I was supposed to have surgery. Instead, the hospital gave me another woman's chart. Different birthday, different allergies, different life. All because the system thought our names and zip codes made us twins." A senator leaned forward. "Mrs. Walker, what would you like this committee to do?" Bernice looked straight at him. "Make the machines remember they work for us, not the other way around." Next, Patrice spoke. She held up a copy of the internal memo she'd uncovered. "This isn't one hospital's problem," she said firmly. "Across the country, hospitals use software that auto-merges records based on cost-saving thresholds. It's efficient for budgets, not for people." She tapped the paper. "We need laws that put humans back in the loop." She outlined 3 reforms. 1. Mandatory human verification. A nurse or clerk must confirm full name, birth date, and allergy list before any high-risk procedure. 2. Transparency in matching algorithms. Hospitals must publish what data fields trigger a merge. 3. The right to review. Every patient should have access to their file to confirm it reflects who they are. Her voice trembled only once when she added, "No one should have to fight this hard just to be themselves." The committee room was silent for a moment before applause broke out. Not the loud kind, but the slow, respectful kind that comes when truth finally lands. Afterward, a reporter caught up with Bernice outside. "Mrs. Walker, what message do you have for the people watching at home?" Bernice smiled. "Check your chart, baby. Say your name out loud. Make sure the world knows who you are." A month later, the committee released its findings. They called for new national standards, the Walker Verification Act. The bill would require all hospitals to use dual human verification and to report any patient mismatches within 48 hours. When Patrice read the headline aloud, Bernice laughed. "A whole law just because I didn't let them cut me open under the wrong birthday." Patrice grinned. "You earned it." Soon, hospitals across the country began posting new signs at their front desks. Check the name, check the birthday, check the person. Training videos reminded staff, no record is confirmed until a patient confirms it too. Some workers rolled their eyes, calling it extra paperwork. But others, especially the nurses, said it made them feel safer too. They called it the 3 checks rule. Bernice was invited to a press event announcing the new policy. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the cameras and smiled. "They fixed the system because one old woman refused to sign the wrong chart," she said. "So if the world ever forgets your name, don't whisper it, shout it until they spell it right." The crowd laughed and clapped. Real reform doesn't start with software updates. It starts with people who refuse to be mislabeled. The Walker Verification Act didn't just protect patients. It reminded the country that healing begins with recognition. That night, back in her hotel room, Bernice opened her little notebook one last time before bed. Who can fix it? The ones who refuse to be erased. How can they fix it? By saying again and again, "That's not my name." She smiled and whispered, "And now they'll never forget it." Next, Bernice returns home, this time to a hospital that greets her with a smile and the right chart. The woman once mistaken for another now stands as proof that identity is care's first form of dignity. When Bernice walked back into Mercy Hills Medical Center 6 months later, it was for a follow-up appointment, not a fight. The front desk looked brighter, friendlier. New posters lined the wall. Check the name, check the birthday, check the person. The young clerk behind the counter smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Bernice Walker. April 3rd, 1951. Bernice grinned. "That's me, sugar. All of me this time." He laughed. "Yes, ma'am. The system double verified your record. You're clear to check in." As she walked toward the waiting area, she noticed something else. Every staff badge now carried a line beneath the hospital logo, Human Verified. She touched her wristband and whispered, "About time." Patrice met her inside, coffee in hand. "No drama today?" "Not a drop," Bernice said. "They even got my allergies right." Patrice smiled. "Looks like they learned." Bernice nodded. "The hard way. But they learned." They sat quietly for a while, watching patients come and go. Some were older, some younger, but all were asked to confirm their names and birthdays aloud before every test. Bernice smiled. "That's music to my ears." After her appointment, the head nurse stopped by. "Mrs. Walker, I wanted to thank you. Because of your story, we retrained the entire admission staff." Bernice raised an eyebrow. "You mean you started listening to folks before the machine does?" The nurse laughed. "Exactly, and it's working. Duplicate errors dropped by 80%. Patrice smiled. "Proof that humanity still beats automation." The nurse nodded. "You'd be surprised how much difference one voice made." Bernice said softly, "I'm not surprised at all." That evening, back home, Bernice sat at her kitchen table, the same spot where she had once opened that hospital bill full of someone else's charges. Now there was only a single envelope marked Patient Satisfaction Survey. She opened it and chuckled. "Finally, they want my opinion." She filled in each line slowly and carefully. Under "What could we improve?" she wrote, "Ask, listen, confirm. Don't assume who we are. We're more than names on a screen." She signed it, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the prepaid envelope. "I reckon that's my last lesson plan," she said, smiling. The next Sunday at church, her pastor called her up to the pulpit again. The congregation rose to their feet, clapping as she walked down the aisle. Patrice stood at the back, recording the moment on her phone. Bernice raised her hand modestly. "Now don't make me blush," she said. "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't let them forget I was here." The pastor smiled. "Sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Remind the world that you exist." The crowd murmured in agreement. Bernice nodded. "I learned something through all this. Healing starts with being seen. Before the medicine, before the surgery, before the paperwork, you gotta be counted." Later that evening, she sat on her porch with Patrice, watching the sunset behind the magnolia trees. "I used to think computers were the future," she said. "Now I see they're just mirrors. They show whatever we've taught them to see. If the people building them can't see me, neither will the machine." Patrice looked at her mother, proud. "Then I guess we've started teaching it." Bernice smiled. "Lesson 1, spell the name right." They both laughed. Bernice Walker didn't break the system. She reminded it that behind every record is a heartbeat. Hospitals across the country now follow the Walker Verification Act. Each patient is confirmed by sight, by sound, and by story. Her case became a teaching module in medical schools, one titled "Identity is Care." And on every hospital wristband printed since, a new line appears beneath the barcode. Verified by person, confirmed by voice. That night, before bed, Bernice opened her notebook one final time. The last page was blank, waiting. She wrote, "They remembered my name. That's all I ever wanted." She closed the book and smiled. Now it's their turn to remember everybody else. To be healed, you must first be recognized. The Walker Verification Act 2030. If this story moved you, share it. Someone you love might still be waiting to be seen. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories, when data meets dignity, for more real stories about courage, change, and the people who make systems human again.